Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to Fall is for Planting. I am Suzanne Bontempo. I am the program coordinator for Our Water, Our World. And our program today is sponsored by and in partnership with the Solano Stormwater Alliance. I am so happy that you all are here. Okay, so I'm going to go through slides for about an hour. I'm going to really respect everyone's time and try to be done by 1. We are going to learn about why fall is the best season to plant and add plants to the garden, which plants are best, how to set our garden up for success, and how to hold on to that rainwater once it starts coming down. We want to keep it on our properties because there are so many added benefits. And the Solano Stormwater Alliance works to protect Solano County's creeks, wetlands, and the bay from runoff that may carry pollutants into the waterways. Relating to gardening, that means avoiding chemicals that can be washed off the lawn and garden and into the storm drains and local creeks by rain and irrigation. So that's what we're here, is just to bring that awareness between what happens around our properties and how it can impact our local waterways. All right, so the Our Water, Our World program is, for those of you that are not familiar, it is a national award-winning program, and we partner with water pollution prevention agencies such as that Solano Stormwater Alliance and retailers that sell pesticides. And we provide integrated pest management education to that retailer and to the public about how to solve pest problems and grow healthy gardens in a way that isn't toxic to the waterways. You might recognize our materials throughout the county. We have partnered with several retailers. We have fact sheets for you to reference, these little blue tags that will identify eco-friendly products. There's QR code posters and, of course, our website where you can view those fact sheets. All right, and the waterways in our gardens. So just a reminder, a watershed is all the water that, any water that isn't absorbed into the ground is going to move across that land and find its way to a stream, a creek, a river, a reservoir, maybe an estuary or marshland. Maybe then it will flow to a bay that eventually gets to the ocean, and along the way, picking up any debris, leaf debris, logs, litter, and so forth with it, bringing it to that waterway. And understand here in California, we are in Solano County, we're located in the San Francisco Bay watershed. So half of that water that flows on, half the water that falls on California actually ends up in the San Francisco Bay. So we are a part of that system, which is pretty dynamic. But how this relates to our gardens is I like to view at all of our properties, all of our individual gardens as its own watershed. So any water that falls on our property that isn't absorbed into the ground, and that could be through an irrigation break or sprinkler, through rainwater, maybe we're power washing the house, any of that water that isn't absorbed in the ground can move across our properties and into a local creek or waterway without getting filtered, taking with it any pollutants in the form of synthetic pesticides or fertilizers with it that will then contaminate our water. So as I mentioned, I teach the Our Water, Our World program, we all practice integrated pest management. So as a reminder, that integrated pest management is a holistic approach to growing healthy gardens and preventing or solving pest problems. We use scientific methods, and we are always going to identify really what is going on, what is that pest problem, and address the why. Why is that problem happening? Because unless we can address the why, we can't really solve the problem. So the action steps in IPM are called controls, cultural controls, which is increasing the health of the garden, mechanical controls, which are using tools to manage pest problems, such as traps and barriers. biological controls, which is inviting living organisms to manage pests, such as beneficial insects. Chemical controls are going to be those pesticides we're always going to use as a last resort when we've exercised all the other controls. And we're always going to focus on and only use eco-friendlies when we need to use them. But today's program, we are really focusing on those cultural controls. We're going to look at what plants are going to, why fall is the best time to plant, and which plants are going to be best for our properties. So let's take advantage of the fall season to add plants. So why fall is the best time to add plants? It's because we are getting shorter daylight hours. This next weekend is going to be the end of daylight savings. And we are really getting, very short daylight hours. It's dark very late into the morning and early into the evening. The evening temperatures are in fact getting cooler. We can expect wetter weather. In fact, rain is in the forecast for this weekend, and we've already had a couple rains so far, which is wonderful. This is great. We like it when it rains. And we are about 8+ months until the heat of the summer is at its peak. So that's really important to understand. And we're also about 10 months out until the driest summer season is upon us. So it gives the plants time to become established. This is a picture. This is a picture of what I'm talking about. When we plant things now, it really gives those root zones time to grow in a way that is puts the least amount of stress on that plant. And then by the time the stresses of the summer, next summer are on us, heat and dry, that plant is going to be off to a really great start. So how do we set our plants up for success? We're going to choose California natives or really plants that are very regionally specific so that they can, and we're going to focus on plants that are going to require less water once established, because we know that where we live throughout Solano County, it has a tendency to be hot and dry during those summer months. We want plants that can adapt to that climate. We're going to grow plants with similar water needs. We're going to always make sure we're grouping, plants that can be compatible together. We're going to water deeply to grow healthy root zones and less often as the plants grow. And we are going to maintain healthy soils and apply mulch to protect that soil and the root zone. And we're going to provide regular garden maintenance. So choosing climate appropriate plants. We're going to look at not only California natives, but other plants such as Mediterranean natives that will thrive and adapt in our summer dry climate. And we're going to do a little bit of homework and notice the unique microclimates of our garden space, because our garden is going to be very different from maybe our neighbors down the street or someone in our garden club that lives across town, or maybe from east side of the county to west side, north side of the county to south side. There's so many microclimates to consider. So we're going to do our homework. We're going to plant the right plant in the right place, because when we can plant that right plant in the right place that's specific for our own microclimate, we are going to take advantage of growing a healthier garden, which will have less pest problems and require less water once established. Think about that. We're matching plants to the condition of the garden, and this will keep them from being stressed and susceptible to those pest problems. But something to really keep in mind, and this one's tough even for myself, because, when I'm at the garden center and I see something that I just fall in love with, or a plant that I've wanted for a long time and it happens to be there, I sometimes am very compulsive. But there are these handy dandy plant tags that come with the plants, or there's information on the side of the pot, which is really important to understand. We want to make sure we're matching the mature size of that plant to the space available. Oftentimes there are different varieties of the same species, different cultivars, and though they look exactly the same as a 4-inch or 1-gallon plant, They might grow to be a more dwarf version or a larger version than what we're expecting. So make sure we understand how big that plant's going to be and that it's not going to outgrow the space. We want to avoid overcrowding and we want to avoid excessive pruning. There's only a few plants that can handle pruning, such as privet or pittosporum hedges, for instance. Everything else really wants to have its natural growth with just some periodical pruning and thinning. And we're going to group these plants by their needs once established. We're going to also consider those plants that can support all of the habitat that surrounds us. So when we can invite our birds and our butterflies and our beneficial insects, and we have those plants available that they utilize for food and also for nesting materials or places of harborage, we start to grow that population. And it is really something special to see. But we also start to see this balance become created. We do this by growing biodiversity. We're going to look at choosing plants that attract beneficial insects and pollinators, because when we attract insects and pollinators, we then are attracting birds and our western fence lizard and other things that are going to only increase the health of that ecosystem. We're going to look at plants that grow flowers, small flowers in clusters, such as that yarrow, or flowers that look like sunflowers or daisies, because that's actually, to our eye, might look like one flower, but those petals are rays. And that button in the middle is actually all of the little tiny flowers. And the reason why this is so important is a lot of our beneficial insects and pollinators are tiny and we don't even recognize them. So it's nice to have a variety of sizes, shapes, colors, and have a variety of the growing season. And then lawn substitutes. Many of us are replacing our lawns or adding areas for our kids or our pets to frolic, even for us to enjoy. And there are so many wonderful substitutes. Traditional turfs are going to be to use a lot of resources, use a lot of water, take a lot of energy to maintain. But there are some really great, these are just my top four: red fescue and meadowgrass, which is a carex. These are lovely and they really look just like turf. They're soft to walk on, and they need little care once established. I think we're only mowing these quarterly. But then for some other incredible hardy ground covers that I absolutely love, lower left corner, that picture is a silver mat. It's called Diamondia. It thrives in baking hot sun and it knits together really tightly, and it has a little yellow coin flower when it's in bloom. And then the creeping thyme, is also an excellent ground cover that knits together very well. It is going to also thrive in baking hot sun. Once established, also requiring little water. Both of these will require little water once established. And the thyme will have a little purple flower that the pollinators absolutely go cuckoo for. They love it. And for those of you that like to grow food, such as myself, this is the time to get cool season food crops in. So it's not just limited to leafy greens, but we're also looking at carrots and beets, a lot of our root vegetables, kohlrabis and so forth, as well as leafy greens. If you are looking to expand the selection that you normally plant and you're looking for something new, sometimes I just am always planting the same thing like kale and chard. So let's expand it and try some new stuff. The Solano County UC Master Gardeners has an excellent vegetable planting guide. Check out their website. It's going to be really helpful. But I really love planting all those alliums, the garlic, the onions, the shallots. This is the time. Halloween is my gauge Um, so this weekend, I'm actually going to be planting shallots and garlic, and in the coming weeks, I'll be getting onions in. It is a real joy to grow garlic and shallots and onions, especially the garlic. It takes several months for it to mature. So it is really very much like having a baby. It's 9 months until we get to harvest. So it's a commitment. But boy, when we pull that garlic out of the ground in June or beginning of July, it is just so rewarding. Other plants we can look at is anything in those brassica families, such as the cabbage, the broccoli, the bok choy. I mentioned some leafy greens, including lettuces, excellent time. These are all going to thrive. And then bare root season is just around the corner. I'm a big fan of bare root season because we are getting plants at the most budget in their most budget friendly form. All right. And we're looking at deciduous fruit trees such as apples, plums, pears, berries such as blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, other caneberries, fruiting vines, perennial vegetables such as asparagus or artichokes, ornamental trees and shrubs. Sometimes we see these also available, such as dogwood, clematis. Of course, roses are going to be available in bare root, and also some ornamental vines, such as wisteria. So these are all, plants that many of the local garden centers, such as Mid City over in American Canyon, will bring in. I know many down in the Berkeley area bring in bare root as well, such as East Bay Nursery. And this is the time to get those spring bulbs in the ground. So tulips, you might want to put in your refrigerator in the crisper drawer for, I'd say, about 4 to 6 weeks, just to ensure that they get that those cool chill hours that they require, because we don't get snow here, thank goodness, not yet. But pretty much everything else, maybe hyacinths and grape hyacinths might need to go in the crisper as well. Just look into the Sunset Western Garden Book to confirm, or do a little online search. I'd have to look that up because it's been a while. But I primarily plant daffodils because I live in an area that has a lot of deer. So I also wanted to list the wonderful selection of bulbs that can naturalize, come back every year, that the deer will avoid. So just wanted to share that with you too. So for more support on plants, I know someone emailed me and asked for specific plants that would do really well in Vallejo. It is hard for me to make any recommendations because everyone has such a different palette. Everyone has a different aesthetic. I definitely would recommend always starting with trees and larger shrubs as your anchors. And then I always like to go to a garden center every month just to see what's in bloom. I also like to make sure when I add plants, I'm planting them in swaths that will create some aesthetic continuity. And we might not have a lot of space, but if those swaths could be about 3 feet, uh, at least about 3 feet wide, or in clusters of about 3 feet, that's helpful for the pollinators. I wanted to introduce you to Cowscapes. If you're not familiar with this amazing California Native Plant Society plant database, it is really great. You enter your zip code. I entered the zip code for Vallejo right here. There are 367 native plants to this zip code, which is amazing. And it's going to give you the list of trees and shrubs and, annual flowers, perennial flowers, and the wildlife it supports and attracts. So this is my number one favorite website to check out. And then your local master gardeners are going to have such great articles and information about plants that are going to thrive in Solano County. And of course, always cruising by your local garden centers. They're going to have a lot of information for you as well. This is your support to help you do the homework you need to do while you're doing the research. All right, so now let's talk about how to set our plants up for success. This is the part that's going to be a little bit of a review for some of us. But it's always nice to hear. So when we buy a plant in a pot, when we take it out of that pot, that root zone is the same shape and size of that pot, right? We've seen this. This is a 4-inch plant, for example, but this is going to apply to 1 gallon, 5 gallon, so forth. We want that root zone to eventually look like the illustration that's on the right. So we're going to take that handy dandy plant tag, or our pruning shears closed, or our fingers, and we're going to try to massage those roots or score those roots, sides and bottom, to start to train those roots to grow out and not around itself. Then we're going to dig that hole. We're only digging the hole as deep as that root zone is. In this case, the 4-inch plant, we're only going down, what is it, about 3 inches. And we're going to plant it on solid ground, but it's the soil around that area that we're going to be amending with compost, and then backfilling and making sure that plant is ever so slightly above grade, just ever so slightly, so that we can put that nice 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch over that root zone to protect it. Now, in this illustration on the bottom, we see the loosened roots around the original root ball. Keep that in mind. We want to start to grow the roots out and down, and we're going to do that with water. So hold on, keep that in mind. Now, if we're buying bare root, this gets a little trickier because it's not easy to identify where to plant. So keep in mind that where the red arrow is pointing to, that is the graft union. We are not planting at that point. We are planting at the crown where the roots are. So sometimes the bare root plants are not as obvious as this rose. This rose has a lot of roots on it in this photograph. Sometimes it's just a couple. So if you are in doubt, you want to ask the garden associate that's selling you the plant, where's the crown? We're going to, then there's always instructions, oftentimes soaking the plant, that root zone, in water for a couple of hours before planting it. But the big takeaway here is that when we plant, we need to create a cone, some type of soil that we're mounding up to support that base. Okay. And then we can backfill with soil. It is not, some growers don't advise that we backfill with any amended soil. We backfill with our native soil. However, if the compost is finished, if the compost does not smell anything other than beautiful fresh dirt, if it's anaerobic on any level, then absolutely don't use it. If we are, we absolutely do not use synthetic fertilizers when we're planting bare root. We want to make sure we do not burn those root zones. I like to amend with finished compost just to get the microbiology in there to help stimulate that root growth, but we want to be really careful not to burn those roots. And then we want to make sure we're watering really deeply, regardless of what, if it's bare root or if it's potted with soil. We want to make sure we are saturating that soil the very first time we water. The very first time we water, we want to saturate that root zone, because a lot of that water is going to wick away and travel to the soil around the perimeter. Okay, but we are going to water much more than we normally would the first time we plant. But then moving forward, we are going to grow deep and wide root zones by driving that water out as those roots grow. So remember that illustration I asked you to keep in mind? That root zone started off as the size of that pot, shape of the pot. Well, we're going to start to drive those roots out by moving the focus of water out. So this top right illustration has this band with that arrow that says this is the irrigation zone. This is the zone where we're going to focus the water. This is also the zone where we're going to focus the fertilizer when we're feeding organically, because that's where the feeder roots are. This is where the little fibrous roots are that are taking up moisture and food. The picture on the lower right, we are going to always keep that water on the outer edges of that plant. I know this is an illustration of the tree, but this applies to any plant we're planting. We're going to always water on the outer edges because that's where those feeder roots are. We want to encourage deep roots, and we do that by watering deeply, and we don't water again until the top few inches of that soil has dried out. Remember, it could take a year to 3 years for some plants to become established, and for trees, it could take upwards to 5 years. During that time, we're babying that plant and that root zone. We are going to always group plants together with similar water needs, and we're always going to group plants together by their microclimate needs. So full sun plants are going to be in one zone, part sun, part shade plants in another zone, plants that like less water once established in another zone, and so forth. We're going to build healthy soil by either adding compost and amending it with our native soil at time of planting, or by top dressing around that root zone with a couple of inches of compost under that layer of mulch. The reason why we add compost is because it improves that soil structure and increases the water retention in that soil, which is incredible. And it reduces the need for synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. So really important. We're building that microbiology, which it grows a healthier plant. We're also going to feed with organic fertilizers because we are now feeding that microbiology, which has that beautiful relationship with the root zones of those plants, allowing that plant to take the minerals it needs and the nutrients it needs on an as need basis. All right. Organic fertilizers are either going to come in the form of a dry fertilizer that looks like a meal, like crushed oatmeal, or in a liquid form, or kind of like little pellets that look very like crushed dirt, maybe. Okay. They're always going to have lower NPK numbers. Really, when we're looking at anything over 10, we should be suspicious. Maybe 12 is the top level for that. But usually I'm always using an all-purpose or a Sure Start or some type of starter fertilizer because that's going to be all I need to really grow a healthy plant. Those numbers on the front of the bag, the NPK, they refer to nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. With organic fertilizers, understand it's not just those macronutrients, but it's also micronutrients that are in those formulas, which is just so wonderful. You know, this is the most natural way to feed our plants, and it's going to have all of the things it needs. But nitrogen is really going to focus on greening up the plant so you can think up. And phosphorus is going to reach down to those roots to help grow healthy root zones and to produce more blooms on the stems so you could think down. And the potassium is going to promote all around well-being, which you can think all around. So that's a good way to think about the NPK, those numbers on the bag or the boxes, up, down, and all around. And I mentioned mulch a couple of times. Mulch is really important. What I'm referring to is something that's organic, and specifically something that's like a wood chip or a bark or arbor chips. And then right now we're seeing a lot of leaves drop. You know, it's fall, so leaves are dropping, and I'm going to share that those leaves are Mother Nature's mulch. It's exactly what that plant needs, because as those leaves decompose, it's going to feed those microorganisms at that root zone. However, we have to rake up the leaves if it's falling on a ground cover or other plants. All right. We don't want those leaves to smother other plants, but if we can't, and we also want to sweep them off any walkways or rake them off any areas that might be a slip hazard. But when we can leave the leaves, and if we do have a lawn and we can leave those lawn clippings, it is feeding that soil. And understand that the beautiful thing that mulch does, it protects the soil. It allows the water to infiltrate with ease, because if there is no mulch on top of the soil is hydrophobic. And if we were to water that soil, it would just bead off or run off. When we have that nice 2-inch layer of mulch on top, it's going to allow that water to sink in with ease. This is very important as we move into the rainy season. It also is going to reduce that water evaporation rate upwards to 70%, believe it or not. As we move into a cooler season, it's going to regulate those soil temperatures, keeping that soil about 10 degrees warmer than the air temperatures 4 inches down. It also keeps that soil 10 degrees cooler during the summer months 4 inches down. So these are all the benefits, including reducing weed seed germination, feeding that soil as it decomposes, and provides habitat for our beneficials. And if you see those birds scratching through those leaves, they're eating those bugs. And it is important for those of us that were growing summer food crops. If we're not interested in growing winter food crops, please don't leave that soil bare. We want to make sure we keep the health of that soil tip top. We want to keep that soil alive and rich. So take advantage of planting some type of cover crop. My favorite, of course, is going to be fava beans because they grow so well here and they give us food. You know, sauteing those fava bean tips with a little sesame oil and garlic is delicious. But the cover crops are not only going to continue to increase the health of your soil, but when they bloom through the winter months, they are attracting beneficial insects. We always have a few days through the winter months that are really warm, 60s and 70 degrees, sometimes even 80, and those pollinators will come out and forage. So this is going to be a wonderful food source for them. And then we want to practice a little maintenance around the garden. We want to pick up any fallen food crops. It's really important. I myself have some apples that I'm still managing out in the garden, picking those up and trying to harvest them all before the winter. And the reason why this is so important is because they attract pests. They attract pests such as yellow jackets, rats, mice, raccoons, possums, and so forth. And if there's codling moth in those apples, that's going to overwinter, or any type of diseases, it's going to overwinter. So it's really good to get these all off site, compost accordingly. And if we have roses or any other plants that have had diseases on their leaves, it's important to do our best to clean up those leaves and dispose of them, maybe strip the leaves off of those plants that have those fungal spores and get it into that green waste bin so it can go to the municipal compost station. We're going to selectively prune, only pruning off what might be a hazard in a windstorm. We don't want to have any limbs over structures such as the roof of a house or a shed. We want to make sure everything is pruned back properly. We want to reach out to local certified arborists to assist if necessary. And we're going to utilize those cover crops and leave the leaves, as I mentioned. We are also going to consider not deadheading everything just yet. Let our birds and other friends of the garden take advantage of some of these beautiful seeds and berries and fruits that are out there. Of course, we want to clean up the tomatoes and the apples and all of that, but there are some natural foods that the birds are really going to enjoy before a cold, wet winter, and also fluff for their nests and so forth. Changing our yard practices might be the easiest way to fight climate change and support our local ecosystem. I just absolutely love this from healthyyards.org. It really does speak to the support that we like to provide our garden's ecosystem and all those that visit it. Irrigation systems, if we haven't yet, this is the time to adjust them. Remember, they're not set it and forget it systems. We want to adjust those controllers to a new season. We are getting shorter daylight hours, so we will not need to water as frequently. We still want to water deeply and thoroughly, but we want to reduce the frequency. So if we're watering 3 days a week, we might want to jump down to 2 or even 1 day right now. I don't think we can absolutely turn our irrigation systems off just yet. If we start to get consistent rains, then absolutely. Best time to water is around those sunrise hours, okay? Avoid evening water because we're going to attract pests like slugs and snails and earwigs. We also might attract rats and raccoons and skunks and possums that like to gnaw on those emitters to get some free water. We train them. We train them when we're watering in the middle of the night. We always want to inspect for leaks and, when possible, convert to drip irrigation systems because they're more water efficient. For more information on watering efficiently, we can visit the Solano County Water Agency's website. All right. And here is the reason. This is my irrigation system. An emitter popped off and a critter chewed on the other spaghetti tubing. Perfect example. So yeah, wasting this water to benefit you so I could take a photo for this slide. But understand, a missing sprinkler head or an emitter can waste thousands of gallons of water that can cost you hundreds of dollars each month in water. So yeah, it's really important. Not always easy, but boy, the first time we get that water bill, we know something's up. So I want to finish the last bit about of our program about talking about holding on to rainwater, because this is really the most valuable thing we can do. It is very easy to employ these systems, and some of them might be a little pricey at the beginning, but it's going to outweigh the cost in the coming years. Because though we might have another rainy winter, I can assure you we're going to have many dry winters in our future before we get rains again. So we want to consider this wonderful campaign, which is slow it, spread it, sink it, and store it. So we want to first prevent runoff. We want to prevent that water from moving away from our property. We want all that water to stay on our property, because when we can keep it on our property, it is going to sink down deeper to recharge the soil much deeper down, so that trees, deeply rooted trees and shrubs, can access that moisture. We want to avoid overloading those storm drains and local creeks. We're going to prevent flooding when we can keep that water on site. We're also going to prevent mulch and soil and other debris from clogging the soil drain, the storm drains. Okay, so when we can keep that water on site, we're really keeping our garden happy and healthy, as well as the storm drains and local creeks. We're going to increase those permeable surfaces whenever possible. So if you do have a garden project coming up, consider to maybe limit concrete or asphalt to just the driveway if necessary. You know, maybe consider doing a gravel, like 3/4 inch crushed gravel if possible. But when we can have decomposed granite or crushed gravel or dry laid patio, that water is able to infiltrate and continue to reach root zones that are in those areas. Those roots don't stop just because the pathway is there. Those roots are going to grow under those pathways. We want to consider installing a rain garden or a seasonal creek. This is super cool. It also, you might have heard the term a swale or yeah, dry creek beds, things like that. This is what it's about. We're going to have these areas that's very shallow. This is not a pond. It's usually just a few inches deep, but it's an area that can capture any overflow from like a rain catchment system or from the gutter, and it'll spread out that water. It'll slow it down, spread it out, and allow that water to infiltrate very slowly. It's excellent to use as like a dry creek or like a very long, narrow rain garden near where there is a hedgerow or near where there are trees, because now we can really capture that water and get it deeper where we need it. These are the best types of plants to plant in that environment, in a rain garden or a swale. We're looking at our native plants that can handle summer dry conditions as well as very wet conditions during the winter months. Okay, so there are lists out there. This is my short list of Natives that I love that I think actually look really beautiful together are ribes, our huckleberries, our yarrow, California poppies and California fuchsia, the buckwheats, the sedges, western sword fern, and California or Pacific coast irises. Just gorgeous. We are going to capture water whenever possible. There are many systems out there, from little to just 50-gallon barrels that we can daisy chain together, to really cool, long, narrow catchment systems that fit along the side of the house, to very big cisterns that can also link together. This is one of my colleagues that are very modest property in San Leandro, but she now completely waters her garden only from rainwater that she captures. It's so inspiring. Keep in mind that an inch of rain over 1,000 square foot surface can capture over 600 gallons of water. I mean, that just blows my mind, and I cannot wait to install these systems in my own place sometime. For more information and for some cash for you, rebates, money on the table, you can go to Water Efficient Landscape, check out the landscape rebate program at the Solano County Water Agency's website. This should be on that resource page that I sent out, and I will double check later. If it isn't, I will amend it and resend it out. And because pests are going to pop up, there is going to be, a need for, finding a solution. So we have the Our Water, Our World website, of course, that has a great catalog of some fact sheets, how to utilize row cover to keep some pests out. That's on the aphids fact sheet, how to manage weeds when those start popping up and so forth. It's inevitable that snails are going to come around as we get into cool, wet winter, wet weather. But then the UC statewide IPM program has this amazing searchable database that really addresses just about any pests that we're faced with here in California. So please have a look at that. Since we are in a Mediterranean climate, it's nice to reference a pest management resource that is suited for our climate. For help with insect identification, I absolutely love bugguide.net. It's a lot of fun. Check it out. You take a photo and then email it to them, and they'll help you identify. And then the National Pesticide Information Center will help you identify how those active ingredients of the pesticides you have in your cupboard or your shed, what's the mode of action? How are they intended to be used? What are the risks or unintended consequences? So check that out. It's a neutral resource that's very helpful and very user-friendly. This recording is going to be on this website at the Fairfield Sassoon Sewer District. This, as well as other educational programs, you can check it out. This is definitely on your resource page, this resource, and I will also be sending you the link after the program has been posted. So I'd like to thank you for joining us. Boy, I got done fast. I'm going to, one moment, stop.